Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us for another story here at Annie Narrates. The title for today's story goes like this. I told my wife that I will have to shut down our current restaurant, but didn't tell her why. Next day she leaves me with a note. Now she wants me to come back 4 months later, after she got to know why I closed the restaurant. My family has owned a high-class Italian restaurant since before I was born. Most of my childhood memories are within those restaurant walls. After school, I would go to the bar to do my homework, follow my dad around the kitchen, and assist him with small tasks around the restaurant. I will never forget making my first salad or my first pizza at 7 years old. The restaurant wasn't just how we earned our money, but it was also where I met my community, and to this day, I still continue to be friends with everyone. It kept our belly full and has been my family's livelihood for my entire existence. It's my father's lifelong work, and I watch him work hard tirelessly for 40 years, continuously without taking a break. It shaped me in ways that I couldn't possibly explain over a Reddit post. It made me confident, brave, and not scared of a little heat, and over the years, I have built incredible relationships with the restaurant staff since we have all worked together for a long time. I started taking the restaurant business seriously around the age of 15, when my dad agreed to pay me so I could earn some extra cash. Initially, I worked as a busboy, then moved on to being a host. As I got a bit older, I transitioned to being a server, although I wasn't particularly skilled at it, especially considering my unfortunate tendency to spill red wine on older patrons, leading to some embarrassingly memorable moments. Around the age of 17, I finally realized that I was always meant to be a chef and fell in love with cooking. I started cooking alongside my dad every day since I discovered my passion for it. It was a mix of beautiful and exhausting experiences, both mentally and emotionally taxing, a daily whirlwind of emotions. I even made the bold choice to drop out of college and commit to running the restaurant full-time since I was clearly good at it. Despite all the challenges that came with running a restaurant, I loved it. I cherished working with my family, relishing in the joy of making people happy, and taking pride in seeing them savor the food we had put so much effort into creating for them. When I turned 28, my dad decided to hand over the restaurant to me as my birthday gift to everyone's shock. He announced that he wanted to retire and that he knew that I was capable enough to take the family legacy forward. It was true that his health has started to drastically fail because of all the years of constantly standing on his feet. Although I was sad about it, I also knew that I was ready. I agreed to take over his business since this is what I had worked so hard for all these years. I met my wife the next year. She was a customer of mine who used to regularly visit my restaurant and eventually asked me out. I am an introvert, so I was pleasantly surprised. We dated for a while and eventually got married. From the very beginning, her family never approved of me, as they were quite wealthier than my family. They looked down on me as, according to them, I was just a restaurant owner. After we got married, they pretty much cut my wife off. I was extremely upset seeing their behavior and consoled my wife as much as I could. In the beginning, my wife was my rock, who supported me both in my life as well as my restaurant business. We used to have a healthy marriage and loved spending time with each other for the first 2 years. However, in the third year, slowly she started to change. She started feeling down out of nowhere and would stay in bed the whole day instead of going to work. Eventually, I got her to go to a doctor who sent her to a therapist, and from there, we found out that she had depression to do with things from her past. I decided to be as supportive as I could, and I took care of most of the housework despite working 50 hours a week at the restaurant. I told her to just rest and get herself in order, and if she needed to talk to me, I would be there for her. This all happened last year, and I have been there for her every step of the way. Unfortunately, my wife continued to feel depressed, basically only laying in bed the whole day and complaining about everything. Whenever I used to talk to her, she would tell me how much she despised her life and how she thought her life would be more than this. I understand that our life wasn't as luxurious as her family's, but I had worked hard to provide for her with everything that she wanted. But she never saw that or appreciated me. We had no intimacy, no cuddles, no going out, and my entire day was filled with work at the restaurant and then housework when I came back home. Day in and day out I worked my ass off, came home to a mess of a house, and started cleaning up, starting dinner and so forth. At the end of the day, I was exhausted like hell, but on top of this, my wife would unload more of her trouble on me and complain about herself, me, and everything around her. I could not even hang out with my buddies to get away from it all, as she would relentlessly call me saying that she was sad, which would force me to get back to her. Eventually, I also had no social life as well. But despite it all, I pushed through hoping that sooner or later, she would break out of it and we could have a proper life together, as I loved her, and they say marriage is for better and for worse. This was quite clearly the worst point of our marriage as it would ever be, and I thought things would get better one day. 4 months ago, my wife got a new therapist. My wife's temperament improved a bit after her initial therapy sessions, and I thought this might be it until her therapist started suggesting to her that she needed time away from me, since her depression had only started after she had married me. Her therapist believed that I might be the cause of it all, and in order for my wife to be okay, she needed to get away from me. I had a slight idea about this since my wife and I would sometimes talk, but I would brush it off thinking it wasn't that serious. I kept performing all my duties as a husband as well. This year, while my home life has been in shambles, my restaurant also came close to shutting down as well. Ever since COVID hit, our business has been affected tremendously. We had to close to the public for 4 months, and since then, we have been open with limited occupancy. We're not pulling in those great numbers that we once used to pre-pandemic. I was getting more and more worried about my restaurant's future. I couldn't even talk about this to my wife since she would find another reason to complain about her life. It was all starting to get to me, and I didn't know who I could talk with. One night when my father called asking me about the restaurant, I finally broke down crying and admitted everything. Later he and my mom drove to meet me so we could all talk about it. I was afraid that my dad would be disappointed in me, but all he did when he first saw me was walk up to me and hug me. I cried like a small child in his arms. My mother consoled me as well and told me that while I had been busy taking care of my restaurant and my wife, I had forgotten to take care of myself. She was right. I was exhausted and running on fumes trying to keep everything together. We sat down to discuss. My parents told me that they had a lot of retirement funds saved up, so they wanted to help me out by investing in the restaurant as long as I came up with a good plan to revive the restaurant. This money would obviously be paid back to them as I couldn't bear to take money from my parents. Relieved after hearing their words, I started researching our competitors and realized that no matter how good our food was, we needed to uplift our decor as well. Everyone loved going to an aesthetic restaurant, so I talked with my parents and decided to hire an interior designer who could help us out. This designer told me that my restaurant's biggest advantage was the location, so if we gave our restaurant a whole new face, we would have customers buzzing in no time. I agreed as over the years, I had seen quite a few restaurants open up in the neighborhood, and even though they had shitty food, they still had customers throughout the year because of their aesthetics and decor that appealed to the masses. For all this to happen, I needed to close down the restaurant for an estimated time period of 3 to 4 months. I was a bit unsure, but my parents told me that I had enough savings anyway, and I needed to take a break too. I assured my staff that we would be opening up in 4 months at the latest, so they didn't have anything to worry about. Some of my loyal staff members who had been working with us for years told me that they were ready to wait and would join back when our restaurant opened up again, while a few others told me that they would find other opportunities. I assured everyone that this was completely their decision and my doors would always be open for them. When all this was taken care of, I decided that I needed to talk to my wife and let her know about my plans since she had no idea about this. Up until then, I didn't want to make her more anxious, but now that things were set in motion, she wouldn't be upset about it. That evening, I had prepared her favorite meal so we could sit down and talk. She came from her therapist appointment and looked like she was in a bad mood. I asked her if she wanted to have dinner with me, and she agreed. While dining and talking, I asked her how she was feeling these days, as a way for me to gauge whether or not I could open up to her regarding my restaurant. My wife immediately started gushing about how great the therapist was, and how she was now starting to see the main problem of her life. I was curious and asked her what she meant by that. This is when she opened up about how her therapist had told her that she had come to believe her therapist's words and that I was the main reason she was depressed. I froze in bewilderment and stared at her. She continued to say how she was slowly starting to see why her parents hated me and had cut her off, since I was nobody special and she hated being married to a nobody. I asked her if she was serious about what she was saying, and if so, why didn't she ever tell me before? My wife retorted that, at first, she was head over heels in love, but after being married, she realized that she had made a terrible mistake, but was too embarrassed to admit her own mistakes. She continued saying how she had expected me to be more successful by now, and thought that I would be the owner of 2 or 3 other restaurants so she would brag about it, but I was still the same man, and she was disappointed with our lives. I was shocked to hear her speak this way. I asked her why she would ever marry me and go against her parents' wishes if she was this embarrassed. She then revealed to me that she had married me because she knew her parents would never approve of me, and that was exciting to her at that age, but she had slowly started to realize that they were right to not approve of me, as she wouldn't want her own child to marry a chef. Hearing her say those words was heartbreaking. I felt crushed because I had spent all this time taking care of her and sacrificing my health for her. She had stopped working ever since her depression and did nothing except lay in bed the whole day. I slaved in the restaurant and then came back home to take care of the house and cook for her, while she treated me like a cash cow and a servant this entire time. Now suddenly, her depression was all my fault? My wife didn't just stop there. She continued to say how I don't treat her well and that I should be more of a man than this. I could feel tears in my eyes, but I didn't want to break down in front of her. I nodded hearing her words and told her that now that I knew how much she hated me, I wanted to give her one more reason to hate me as well. She looked at me intently as I opened up about how I shut down my current restaurant. Before I could tell her the reason why, she erupted in anger. She sprang from her chair and asked me how dare I do such a thing, and what was I going to do now to support her. I had never seen my wife behave this batshit crazy. She took the plate from the table and threw it on the floor. She told me that this is why she should have left me a long time ago. I was frozen in shock seeing her behave this way. She continued to shout at me, telling me that I was a worthless person who didn't deserve to be with someone like her. She yelled that she was done living with a failure like me. I couldn't hear her yell any longer, so I picked up the broken fragments of the plate and started cleaning up. She continued to yell at my ears, but honestly, it was all a blur to me. I think I was so traumatized by her reaction that I didn't know how to react to her shouting. That night, I slept in the spare bedroom as I was afraid of sleeping next to her. Throughout the night, I could hear her banging and moving around the house, but I kept myself inside the room. The next day when I woke up, the house was eerily quiet. I walked out of the room to see that all her clothes were missing. I looked around the room and her cosmetics and jewelry were gone as well. My brows furrowed in confusion, and I walked downstairs to see a sticky note on our fridge. My wife had hurriedly scrambled on the note which read, "Goodbye. Hope to never see you again, loser." This is when I realized that my wife had actually left me. All my emotions since last night came flooding back in. I couldn't believe that after everything I had done for her, she had decided to leave me when I needed her the most. I spent the next month calling her family, begging and humiliating myself in the hopes of getting her back. I apologized to them for everything that I may have done wrong and begged them to let me talk to my wife since she had blocked me. Honestly, I was close to ending it all as I was so hopeless at that point. But my parents supported me throughout all this and urged me to think of them and my restaurant. Those were some dark days in life, and I didn't know how to function in my life without my wife. I slowly started to realize that since our marriage, all I had done was cater to her and become a caregiver, so without her, I felt empty. Over time, I started realizing that my life did change, but it changed for the better. I could finally indulge in my hobbies, which I had not done in years. The house was not a mess every time I woke up in the morning, and I could relax without feeling guilty or someone complaining to me. 2 weeks in, I even realized that I could hang out with my buddies again, grab a beer and enjoy life, and slowly, I started to realize that I like my life this way. Slowly, that turned into more and more realizations until I finally realized that I had fallen out of love with my wife for a long time, and it didn't hurt as much that she left. When my wife filed for divorce, I readily signed the papers. She didn't want anything from me, nor did I want anything from her, so we had no disputes. Our divorce proceedings are currently going on. Since then, a lot has changed in my life. My restaurant has been slowly but surely remodeled to exactly what I had envisioned. The interior designer did a fabulous job in just 4 months. Last week was my restaurant opening after so many weeks of being closed down. I had invited all my family members, as well as close family and friends for a grand opening. Everyone looked so happy and congratulated me on how good the restaurant looked now. I was happy to see everyone clicking their pictures and having a good time. I guess some of them must have uploaded these photos on social media because I started receiving calls for bookings the very next day. I know it's just been a week since my restaurant opened up again, but I feel rejuvenated after taking a long, much-needed break. I love that some of my old staff members stuck by me and are now back at the restaurant. I was happy in my life. Today, out of nowhere, I suddenly got a call from my wife. I was a bit hesitant to pick up her call, but she had never called me since we filed for divorce, so I assumed this might have been an emergency or something to do with our court date. She congratulated me on the revamped space and told me how she had seen the photos on social media. I thanked her, waiting for her to say the real reason she had called me. She then started saying how she saw how happy I looked in the pictures, which reminded her of the time when she fell in love with me. I held my breath as she continued to say she had come to realize that she had made a huge mistake by leaving me. She said that she had been an idiot to take her therapist's words as fact and how much she had missed me all these months. She told me how proud she was of me in the restaurant and wanted me to forgive her so we could give our marriage a try again. For a moment, I wanted to say yes. Please come back, but I know I couldn't do that. I just blurted out that it was she who had left me in the moment I needed her the most, so she shouldn't be talking about getting back together. She then told me that I should have been more upfront with her about the real reason I had shut down the restaurant, and then started to blame me, saying that she would have never left me had she known the real reason. Hearing her words, I knew she was lying, since her main reason to leave me was because she believed I was behind her depression. I firmly told her that I was quite busy with my restaurant, so unless she had called me to order food, we couldn't have this conversation anymore. Since then, she has sent me multiple texts saying that we should think about reconciling and that we can make it work now. So, am I the a-hole for not believing her words and not wanting to go back to my ex-wife? To everyone who is scared for me and keeps asking me if my wife can now ask me for half of my restaurant, please be assured that we signed a prenup before our marriage. As I had mentioned before, my wife comes from a wealthy family, so we signed a prenup. Hence, she and I can't take anything from each other that we got before our marriage. My restaurant is a family restaurant and came into my possession long before I was married to her, so she can't take that away from me. Now, coming on to the update, I have no plans on reconciling with her, and I will continue with our divorce proceedings. After reading all your comments, I am glad that so many of you agree with me and support my decision. Our marriage was toxic, and it took me a long time to see that. Fortunately, she left me. Otherwise, I don't think I would have ever seen the truth and left her. My parents do know that she called me and now wants to come back into my life, but they are hoping that I don't make the same mistakes twice. They have firmly told me to stand my ground against her and not let her back in, which is exactly what I plan on doing. I am planning on meeting up with her this weekend and having a clear discussion regarding this once and for all. It's been a month since I last updated. I did meet up with my ex-wife as I had mentioned earlier. I called her to my restaurant after we had closed down in the evening so we could sit down and talk. Over the days leading up to our meeting, she had continued to beg me to reconcile and had even convinced her parents to call me and talk to me. They told me how unhappy she was and urged me to let the divorce go as I was the only one who could make her happy. That evening when we met, I could sense the weight of the conversation ahead. She first began by expressing how much she regretted her decision to leave and how the past few months had been an eye-opener for her. She detailed how she missed me, our life together, and the comfort of being in a relationship. Her words were filled with remorse and eagerness to make things right. I listened quietly, absorbing her emotions, and then I spoke. I told her that I couldn't go back to how things were. I recounted the struggles we went through, how I worked tirelessly at the restaurant, and how I had been there for her during her tough times. I expressed how hurt I was by her sudden departure and the note she left. I told her about the months of feeling miserable, trying to salvage our relationship while my restaurant faced challenges. I opened up to her about the realizations I slowly had during our time apart, how I found solace and happiness in rediscovering my passions and the support I received from my family. I explained that I had moved on, emotionally and mentally, and that the past month had been transformative to me. In response, when she started pleading with me to reconsider, I firmly refused. I explained that her actions had deeply affected me, especially discovering that she left because of what her therapist suggested about our marriage. I couldn't ignore the hurtful things that she had said, like blaming me for her depression and calling me a failure. Nevertheless, she continued to plead, expressing her desire for a second chance, claiming that things could be different now that she understood the gravity of her actions. She mentioned the potential for change and the willingness to work on the issues that had led to our separation. In response, I acknowledged her feelings but reiterated my decision. I explained that the pain and hurt caused during our marriage couldn't be easily forgotten. I mentioned the toxic dynamics we had, her hurtful words, and the fact that I had found a renewed sense of self outside the marriage. As the conversation progressed, emotions ran high. She alternated between apologies, declarations of love, and attempts to convince me of her sincerity. Yet, my stance remained firm. I told her that despite any changes or realizations, I couldn't go back to what we once had. In the end, as her frustration intensified, she slammed her hand on the table, a mixture of anger and desperation evident in her eyes. I firmly asked her to leave since we had nothing left to talk about. She rose from her chair abruptly, knocking it backward. She cast me one last furious glance. Then, without a word, she stormed away. Following our meeting, I had a conversation with my lawyer to discuss the unexpected turn of events with my ex-wife. I explained how she appeared to have a change of heart, expressing remorse and a desire to reconcile. Despite her newfound sentiments, I emphasized my unwavering decision to move forward with the divorce. In response, my lawyer reassured me that, at this juncture, there was minimal risk of financial harm from her side. He said that there was nothing that she could do, and this reassured me. Furthermore, he advised me against engaging in any future conversations with her, at least until the divorce proceedings had been finalized, so this is what I plan on doing for now. I refuse to take her calls and have muted her messages so I don't have to see them anymore. It's been 5 months since my last update, and guess what? I'm finally divorced. My ex-wife tried her best to get me to change my mind, but I completely ignored her, and it might have finally got to her. I am just happy to be rid of her. I can't believe how good it feels to be free and light again. My restaurant is doing really well. People love the new look and the food, and the positive vibes are making it a success. My parents have been amazing throughout everything. They have supported me, and now that my restaurant is back on track, I am slowly paying them back for all the financial assistance they had provided to me. Our family bond has gotten even stronger and stronger over the months. As for me, I'm doing much better. After the divorce, I've been rediscovering things I love, hanging out with friends, and just enjoying life more. It's been a journey of healing and growth, with the restaurant doing great, my family by my side, and a new sense of freedom. I'm looking forward to what's next. The past is behind me, and I am excited about the future. Alright guys, that was a wrap up for today's story. Thank you very much for listening. Smash that like button for me, and subscribe for more stories. Thanks again. We will be seeing you in the next one.